Akeem Browder is a social justice advocate and agent of change. This Bronx native works to honor the legacy of his brother Kalief Browder and mother Venida Browder by working with elected officials, lawyers, doctors, college students, and community-based organizations to change laws, policies, and regulations that devastate poor communities and families that have been impacted by mass incarceration and solitary confinement in state prisons. He is the founder of Shut Down Rikers and the Kalief Browder Foundation. A civil engineer by trade, he is currently traveling the country promoting the 6-part Spike TV series titled Time, the Kalief Browder Story. Please welcome Akeem Browder.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Today is May 15, 2010. The time is now about 7:47 in the evening.
I just needed to get my story out.
And you are Mr. Kalief Browder, is that correct?
Yes. I was going home from a party.
911 operator 1719, where's emergency?
2 male black guys, they took my brother book bag.
There was a guy saying that I robbed him. They said, we're gonna take you to the precinct.
Did you rob somebody in the beginning part of May, Mr.
No.
Browder?
No.
The time is now 10 to 8. This interview is concluded.
They said, most likely we're gonna let you go home.
Rikers. One of the most violent jails in the country.
All right. Look what he's doing. Stop resisting.
But then
What the fuck is wrong with you, man?
I never went home.
Kalief was my son. I know what he went through. I went through a lot with him.
I felt like I was done wrong. I felt like something needed to be done about this. If I just say that I did it, nothing's gonna be done about it. I didn't do it. No justice is served. Nobody hears nothing at all. I had to fight. You want me to walk away like it's okay? It's not okay. I lost my childhood. I lost my happiness.
They've destroyed my life, my family's life.
911 emergency. Ma'am?
This is supposed to be the greatest city in the world. And we're supposed to trust in this justice system. Where's the justice?
NAPSA, PD, DOC, DOE, DOJ, OCFS, DOH. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. NAPSA, PD, DOC, DOE, DOJ, OCFS, DOH. I wanted to run off the list of names of services like my mom would run off the list of names of the many children she cared for. I'll show you what I mean in a second. My mother, Venida Browder, the reason why I'm here today was in the foster care world and loved it. All the children she cared for, whether adopted like myself or cared for a length of time, all her children she treated equally and unbiased. Each of the kids under her care, custody, and control was seen in her eyes as innocent and blameless. And so, she wanted to provide. She wanted to provide a shelter that was loving, learning-friendly, and safe. Under her authority, she was held responsible for nurturing our little bodies into the grown men and women we are today. Similar to your parents, I'm sure. Venida Browder tasked herself with a self-assigned duty to protect and serve her children. School days, preparing for meals, was her morning exercise. Preparing our clothes and our food, our bags for school, getting some of us on the school bus, walking a few others to school 3 blocks up, and every now and again, after walking those few to school, she would then find 2 individuals that didn't make it on the school bus, Raheem and Akeem. That's me, y'all. She'd then prepare herself to rush into the little red Honda she called Betsy, like speed racer, to get us to school on time. In the back seat, I sat squished between Raheem and a car seat, holding her youngest son, my youngest brother, Kalief Browder. Kalief, he was my workout buddy. He was my workout partner. He was really strong, energetic, but he was very enduring. All of us kids would get a kick out of hearing my mom call in all of us one by one, because she'd say all of our names and not forget a single one. Shahan, Raheem, Akeem, Jimmy, Nicole Caroline, Spud, Kamal, Kalief. She would call our names. My mom would say it fast and with precision, in order from eldest to youngest, like many families that enter into the school-to-prison pipeline. We've all seen the acronyms, and they just become words on a paper. Corrections, education, Children and Family Services, Department of Health, pretrial services. Alongside these comes the mottos, the sayings that quickly describe their line of duty: protect and serve, care, custody, and control, equal opportunity, justice. Justice. What's justice without accountability? A chance at a fair, unbiased proceeding? How about a true process implicating a person's innocence until proven guilty? Or even a chance to have equal opportunities, like proper representation afforded to the wealthy and the poor? Based on this definition, how do we see justice? my family knows that in this crisis firsthand, we learned it the hardest possible way. My youngest brother, the one in the car seat, Kalief Browder, ended his life after spending 3 agonizing years at Rikers Island on the suspicion of stealing a backpack. A backpack. In any other place, with any other skin color, and any other household income, this would have been a non-offense. Perhaps community service if charged and found guilty. But for Kalief, it became the beginning of a death sentence. But many have heard his story, a blameless, innocent youth from an urban community in the poorest congressional district of America, the Bronx, New York. A bail, $3,000. $3,000. A bail that may not sound extraordinarily high to some, but to members of my family, in our community, it's astronomical. A bail, my brother had sat in jail defenseless and alone in one of the country's most lawless and terrifying jails for 3 horrific years. In solitary confinement for up to 23 hours a day, Kalief was being beaten by guards and inmates. Imagine this. While his friends were preparing to graduate high school and enter the workforce or begin college, Kalief was being physically and emotionally abused by the criminal justice system that has used the profit-driven based cash bail system to destroy the lives of New York's poor in every region of the state. Today in New York, nearly 70% of those held in jail across the state are imprisoned indefinitely pre-trial. Most are there not because they are dangerous, but because they are poor. Over decades, the government inaction in the face of this social and fiscal crisis, thousands of families have been torn apart and thousands of families have been ruined across generations. There are 63 state Senate districts in New York. And my neighborhood in the Bronx, the place where my family calls home, is the poorest. Nearly 40% of my neighbors live below the poverty line. And if you're a child in that district, your number jumps up to almost 50%. The median household income is roughly $34,000 compared to the national income of $53,000. This isn't an abstract statistic. It's our reality. We know it all too well how poverty is the indicator and the dictator of every move and far too many outcomes. These are just numbers. But to me, the life behind those bars was lived by a 16-year-old child that missed out on his favorite cartoons and opportunities with families and friends, birthday parties, graduations, building relationships, and growing to be a young, successful man he dreamed of becoming. Social justice issues are based on the concepts of human rights and equality. The way in which human rights are manifested in everyday lives of people at every level of society. It's possible that the reason we are so uncomfortable when speaking about issues like this is not because we don't have enough of them or speak enough about them, or that there isn't enough Kalief Browders to go around. However, it's because we still haven't successfully established the efforts to abolish its existence. We have designed and sustained a system that punishes the poor for too long. We have an obligation to change this. Many people in local jails are ultimately found to be innocent, or as in Kalief's case, to have their charges completely dropped. I started the Kalief Browder Foundation to be the living legacy of Kalief and what he stood up against. Years of systemic injustice that tears down the youth in poor communities of color due to wealth and class, which is why we demand justice. Our mission is to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline system prevalent in disenfranchised communities by providing opportunities and support for youth and adults who are impacted by the criminal justice system to become agents of policy and policy changes. With the utilization of social justice panels, civic engagement programs, and social-emotional learning games, we strive to empower, restore, and re-educate youth and adults. Historically, there hasn't been a concentrated effort for successful youth integration into society. The Kalief Browder Foundation supports youth and young adults who were negatively impacted by the justice system to enhance their social emotional skills and positive peer relationships. Our social emotional learning program creates a fun and safe environment without judgment, which encourages open communication that helps make learning possible. Our work together with Dr. Maisa Akbar, who's in the house, actually in support, has shed light on the cross-sectionality of trauma and suicide, which often results from the impact of imprisonment and incarceration. Mental health interventions and treatment are often overlooked as an alternative to incarceration. Together, through our work, we create alternative programming for marginalized youth that can have a positive and successful outcomes in many urban communities. Alone. There was no one to stand up for Kalief when he was locked up at 16 years old. He had no voice. He had no campaign. Kalief had no marches and no lobbyists. Now is our time to do his memory and that of so many others justice by making sure no other family is destroyed and life taken because of an unjust and unaffordable system. If Kalief's story moved you, please visit our website to learn how you can demand justice. Thank you.
Would you mind taking some questions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Akeem. We are running a few minutes ahead of schedule, so that's going to leave us some time. Akeem's graciously said he'd answer any questions you might have. Unfortunately, we do not have any house microphones, so you're going to have to speak up, but please ask any questions you have of Akeem. Anybody?
I'd like to start off, if anything.
Absolutely.
How many here have actually seen the story that we've done? By show of hands. So a lot of you actually know of the story, and just by show of hands, anyone here actually knows anyone that's actually incarcerated in your circle and intimately related to you? Or it doesn't just impact those that are in jail. In prison, jail, that's what they're going through. But what my mother experienced was the collateral damage to someone that has their child in jail, that has their child that's going and alone in solitary confinement. What my mother ended up dying from was a broken heart. And so the collateral effect is something that everyone that can relate, not just if your child, but someone that you love is in jail. It's not a place for an innocent until proven guilty person, because realistically, that's what you are. Of course there's crime out there. Of course there's human activity that we all exhibit that may be illegal. But we have to do better than what we're doing now to show that we have some human characteristics about us that's caring and supportive and rehabilitative. Thank you.
Anybody have questions? Akeem, I have one for you. Could you talk to us about the Raise the Age campaign and how that's working and what effects you're finding from that?
Anyone here from New York? How's it going, everyone? From the Bronx? No. Those that are not familiar with Raise the Age at this point, so Raise the Age was a good bill that we were actually fighting for. The people of the street of New York knew that 16 is not a justifiable adult for a kid, or a standard for a kid, a child. And so we were originally looking for 16, 17, and 18-year-olds to be a part of as the adolescent population, so that they're out of adult prisons and handed into family court, depending on certain cases. And so last year, Raise the Age was passed for 16 and 17-year-olds, and certain cases, not all 16 and 17-year-olds would be encompassed in this. That would then say that what cases aren't. Kalief's case actually wouldn't have been a part of this. Raise the Age would have only impacted everyone outside of Kalief, although Kalief was the mantle, the mortar. That being said, we need to do a lot more, because laws only went so far, and we still have to take it further in understanding the legislative process isn't really just saying what cases, because we kind of demonize the black community and say that what Kalief had was a robbery in the second for allegedly stealing a backpack. They gave him robbery in the second. Unfortunately, the orange man in office name, the Trump charge, as robbery in the second, and they use it as a tool to scale down and offer a lower charge. But that offer, if it's not taken, which Kalief didn't do, and so he didn't take an offer, and so his trump charge continued to be the robbery in the second, which then left him inevitably in jail on Rikers.
And as I understand from the story, he spent much of his time in Rikers in solitary confinement, which led to a lot of problems for him.
Kalief, as I tried to give an understanding, if you've seen the show, actually you could still see it, it's on Netflix now, but Kalief was a kid. He was a normal kid before he went into jail, and we all know actually that we could even prove that Kalief had no mental illness because we are adopted. And so that means we are already in the system. From birth, given up at birth into the adoption system, we knew Kalief didn't have any mental health record of any inabilities or anything. And so when entering into the Department of Corrections, into the justice system, that's when his mental health started debilitating. They neglected him, meaning they would leave Kalief in solitary confinement 3 to 4 days at a time without food. That means breakfast, lunch, dinner, no food. And then on the fourth meal, on the fourth day, I'm sorry, let me correct myself, it was 4 meals, at 4 meals a time. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, breakfast. And then on lunch, he would say that they would give him a tray of cabbage and bread. And Kalief, to make things better for himself, he had to envision or fathom that he's doing himself some justice, so he still wanted to work out. He wanted it, so he wouldn't eat the bread. And he told me during one of the visits that, you know, he didn't want to eat carbs. And so he would, not that he wanted to starve himself, but just trying to maintain himself as a 16-year-old, 17, 18 years old, on Rikers, in solitary confinement, when no one's paying attention. They're ignoring you, neglecting you, beating you. And so solitary confinement alone, putting a human in a cage, where if you've seen an animal in a cage and walk past, you would want to take that animal home and treat it and care for it and love it. Well, our human beings on Rikers Island is behind bars in a cage. You just can't see them. So you can't care for them as much if you've seen them in person.
And for those of us who aren't as familiar with Rikers and the effort to close Rikers, can you give us an update on where New York is on that process and what that means?
So New York, I actually ran for mayor in New York last year, in which obviously criminal justice is a strong platform in which I proposed to shut down Rikers because 60% of its population are considered mentally ill. So they shouldn't be in jail with those that are not classified as mentally ill. So I have proposed to take 60% out and put them in the mental health asylums that we have throughout New York City. At least they would get the services that they need. On top of that, the other 30% is actually considered nonviolent. And so 30% nonviolent, that's hopping a turnstile, that's sleeping on a park bench, or opening up a canister, a bottle of alcohol, which you can't have on the street. Or Kalief's case, allegedly stealing a backpack. These are nonviolent offenses that they're sitting in jail for 6 months, a year, 3 years, waiting for their day in court. New York proposed to shut down Rikers because it was a clever topic to talk about. The incumbent was running for mayor, so he took the mantle after me. He said he would shut it down in 10 years, yet he's only in mayor for another 4. And so there is the complication. We talk about things, but we don't do it. It's lip service. Rikers Island is still open today. What they're doing to say they're shutting down Rikers is moving the population off of Rikers But that doesn't solve the problem by moving people, human beings, off of one place and bringing them to another place, making that the new Rikers Island. Because the inherent disgusting behavior on Rikers is coming from not the walls and the floors, but the environment and the culture of abuse. And so that is from the officers bringing in weapons, drugs. That can't be, you can't make cocaine on Rikers Island, yet they found crazy loads of cocaine on Rikers Island. And so you can't just make it there, obviously. So the culture of violence, the neglect, the abuse, can't get just transferred over from one jail to another. It's the rehabilitation. So they're not shutting it down. They're just lowering the population low enough to say that they're doing something just by transferring.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble seeing with the lights. Ma'am? So for those of you who couldn't hear the question, let me just repeat the last bit. She's wondering what services the City of New York provided Kalief in transitioning back into the community.
Thank you for asking that. That is a very likely or viable question to ask. If your child is trapped in any jail, Rikers is not all jails, and all jails are not Rikers, yet coming home and transitioning back into the society that we live in, the free society, so-called, the services that they provide usually are work release or transitional housing. Kalief didn't get any of that. He was a kid that came home to my mom's house. And so as a young adult, my mom had to bear the brunt of everything. She had to be the counselor. The family had to be the consoler. The family had to be the supporter financially, mentally, emotionally, physically. Kalief would walk the four corners of my mother's driveway as though it's solitary confinement again. And so my mom had to bear that, watch that, and come up with ways to rehabilitate on her own, because it's nothing just given to you. You're just released. Actually, Kalief was released without anyone knowing, because we were waiting, as he was waiting, for trial, to put the system on trial, for holding him and bringing him back and forth to court 38 different times, to only inevitably just drop his case and open up the doors on a Tuesday morning without giving the family or himself any notice. Actually, he says that they just woke him up out of his cell, told him he had a court date, which he did not have, brought him to the courthouse, did not see or get a chance to call his family, and a judge dropped his case and then opened the door and let him out. He called me and said he's in New York. A family member is going to struggle with that thought, knowing that you were just gone for 3 years, and now you're in New York City. Did you escape? This was baffling to my mom, and yet we went, some of the services that should be provided should be giving him an attorney, or that person an attorney, to then be able to start a case for that time loss. But we did that. I drove him around 11 different civil attorney offices before I could find Paul Prestia, which was the only attorney that took his case, but every other attorney said that he had no case and that the system did what they were supposed to. Nothing is the answer.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, please.
No.
So let me just repeat that. So she's wondering why Kalief was placed in solitary confinement.
And asks, was it due to his age? Which
right. Was it due to his age?
So they have an adolescent housing unit for 16, or what they call adolescents, children basically. But no, that wasn't. And if you do get a chance to watch the show, you would see that Kalief was actually beat up by guards. He was beat up by inmates, as I said, and it was because he wasn't in any gang, and he wouldn't submit to being in a gang. And so they put him in a blood house, knowing that he's what they call a nondescript or not affiliated. And so going into a house like that is ultimate death. They're not going to want you there. And so Kalief didn't want to submit to being a blood, and so one fight in one house led to another fight. And since he fought back, he pissed off every other blood in every other house. And everywhere he went, he had a problem. Robbing him or extorting him, officers letting it happen. They don't jump in until actually he ends up needing stitches or bloody. So solitary confinement, I'm sorry. Yeah. Solitary confinement wasn't for his protection, actually. It was only because when they put him, the first time they put him into solitary confinement was because he mouthed off to one of the officers. And so they figured I'd teach him a lesson. And so they put him in solitary confinement, and from there, they add time. So you get a ticket. That ticket then determines how many days you're in solitary confinement. And if you do anything in solitary confinement, you can get another ticket while you're in there, adding on to more time and more time. Eventually, it was over 1,000 days that Kalief spent in solitary confinement.
Way in the back. So the question is, how many of the people in Rikers plead guilty so that they can be released?
So studies that we've done so far within the last 3 years, starting at 2015, while we were lobbying this year for criminal justice reform, studies have shown that over 82% of the population take a plea bargain, and less than 10% actually go to trial. And yet, they're taking plea bargains, obviously, to get out of a place like Rikers Island. And we overwhelmingly showed this in report after report after report to show that the system actually is flawed. They're only doing this, then taking a felony, coming home with a felony because of the situation that they're in while on Rikers. Just imagine being arrested for sleeping on a park bench, or something minuscule as jumping a turnstile because you don't have the money to pay for the train. It's a wealth-based detention. However, you're there and your court case keeps on getting delayed because they don't have enough time to deal. They're just overwhelmed, they say, with cases. And so you just want to get out of there as soon as possible. You lost your job already if you're there for more than a week. You lost probably more than likely your apartment because you're there more than a month. Then you lose your family support because if you come from a poor community, your family cannot support you. That causes friction and strife in your household, that your son or your loved one is in a place that you can't get them out of because you just can't afford to pay it. However, a person, on the other hand, as we made the example this year, that May 25th, Kalief's birthday, is the same day that Harvey Weinstein bailed himself out on $1 million bail. And if we're thinking that bail, which is set up to be a way that you're obligated to come back to court so that you can get your money returned, then that doesn't mean that there's a safety factor involved. Because someone as dangerous as Harvey Weinstein can be released, but someone as non-threatening as Kalief Browder can't be released. It doesn't really help your community to have him outside and him not. For that matter, both of them could be inside or out. The financial asset is the only thing that keeps you. And so you're inevitably being locked up because you're poor.
Yes, ma'am.
So Paul Prestia, and
go ahead.
Say the question. I'm sorry. The woman just asked what was the outcome of the case. That Paul Prestia, the attorney who took the case, the outcome yet has been determined. It still is going on because every family, every black family should know that not to take a payment, a settlement, because that's not actually helping our families. My mother wanted to take that settlement. They offered her $20 million and wanted to take that settlement because she was dying. She had her first heart attack on Rikers when visiting Kalief, and they told her that she couldn't see him, that something happened to him. And so they slowly killed off both my family members. I can't accept, as now the person that's in charge of the lawsuit, I can't accept a payment knowing that they took two of my family members. That doesn't mean I want $40 million. I want justice. But justice looks different. Thank you. Justice looks different to all of us. So justice for Eric Garner's family. Justice came in the form of $9 million. Justice for my cousin, Sandra Bland, who's my mother's sister's daughter, still hasn't come. Justice for my family is those officers and that judge who knowingly told Kalief that just take the plea and you can go home, knowing there was no evidence, no victim. If you heard the 911 call, we had to subpoena the court to get the footage and the 911 call. And the call came in from a person who said that he robbed my brother's backpack. He's a third party. He did not see the black kid who took my brother's backpack. They had no witness, no evidence, no backpack, and they held him. So since Kalief didn't take the plea, we have the minutes from his proceedings in which the judge then said, I'm going to teach him a lesson. That judge is now Bronx, New York's DA, District Attorney, Darcel Clark. Darcel Clark, the judge who told Kalief, I'm going to teach you a lesson, and then held him even longer. I want justice for that. I want justice for the officers who can see a kid who's 5'4", 130 pounds, to beat him, to watch him hanging himself in jail, in solitary confinement, to watch him hanging himself and stand in front of his cell and laugh. And then when they had enough, you see them in the camera saying, wrap it up. The cell opens, and you see they obviously pull him down. You don't see inside, but they beat him up for giving them more paperwork. This isn't justice. This isn't rehabilitation. And this is why I said the acronyms, corrections. This isn't corrective behavior. So that's why I started the foundation, to prevent our kids from going into the system to begin with. Not aftercare, before care. To put programs in communities, whether it's you and I funding it, or whether the government funds it themselves. But something has to come to prevent these kids from even going inside of the system. Because aftercare is already too late.
Well, as you can tell, this is a very powerful story. And unfortunately, probably not the only story like this one in the country. So we're glad that you were here this evening to hear it. And it's important that we all stand with Kalief. So please thank Akeem Browder.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful.